When Brandon offered me his place after I fled my mom's apartment, I thought I'd found the perfect solution. He was stable, caring, and totally clueless that I was still seeing my ex Caleb on the side. For 3 months, I played them both, taking Brandon's housing and Caleb's money while lying to their faces daily. I quit my job without telling Brandon, pretended to have my own apartment to Caleb, and juggled two relationships with surprising skill. I even convinced myself I was the victim in all this. But when Caleb showed up at Brandon's door unexpectedly, my carefully constructed world collapsed in seconds. Now I'm standing in the rain with nowhere to go, screaming at Brandon's window as he ignores my calls. He threw me out and blamed me for drama with my ex. The worst part? I'm already eyeing my next target, ready to start the cycle again. When I found my mother passed out on our couch with some strange guy, my rent money missing from my dresser drawer again, something in me finally snapped. I'm Vicky, 26, and in that moment I knew I couldn't live like this anymore. My hands trembled as I called Brandon, my boyfriend of only 3 months. Can you come get me, please? My voice cracked as I tried to hold back tears. Brandon arrived 30 minutes later, his Toyota idling outside our apartment complex. I climbed in with just a backpack of clothes, mascara streaked down my face. You okay? He asked, his voice gentle but hesitant. I shook my head, letting the tears flow freely now. I can't go back there, I just can't. Brandon drove in silence for a few minutes before sighing. You can stay with me until you figure things out. I could tell he wasn't thrilled about it. We hadn't even said I love you yet, but what choice did I have? Sleep in my car? Go to a shelter? No thank you. The first few weeks at Brandon's apartment were actually pretty great. I cooked for him, kept things tidy, and we'd cuddle up watching movies at night. Brandon worked long shifts at the warehouse, coming home tired but always greeting me with a small smile that made me feel safe. Boring, predictable, but safe. That stability lasted exactly 18 days. I quit, I announced when Brandon came home from work. I was sprawled on his couch, painting my nails the same red as my former Trendy Treasures employee badge. Brandon froze halfway through taking off his work boots. What? My manager Melanie has been on my case for weeks. Today she accused me of giving my employee discount to a friend, which I totally didn't do, by the way. I walked right out. The color drained from Brandon's face. So you don't have a job now? I waved dismissively. Don't worry, I'll find something way better. But 2 months later, I hadn't found anything better. I'd applied to a few places online, but nothing really jumped out at me. Brandon never said anything directly, but I could tell he was getting annoyed about covering all the bills. Not my fault the job market is terrible right now. Plus, I was keeping the apartment clean and cooking most nights, so it's not like I was just freeloading. What Brandon didn't know was that I had a backup plan. Or rather, a backup boyfriend. Caleb and I never officially broke up. We were on a break when I met Brandon, and I just never got around to making it permanent. Caleb still thought we were working things out, and honestly, with no job, the extra help has been nice. He'd send me money for what he thought was my share of rent at my new place, buy me gifts, take me shopping. When can I see your new apartment? Caleb asked one afternoon at the mall food court. It's been, 3 months since you moved out of your mom's place? I stirred my smoothie nervously. The timing's just not right. My roommate is super private. Roommate? You never mentioned a roommate before. I cursed myself silently. I was getting careless, the lies harder to keep straight. Yeah, I had to get someone to split costs, economy, and all that. I leaned forward, changing the subject. Can you help me with my phone bill this month? I'm still waiting to hear back from that marketing job. Caleb's eyes softened as he reached for his wallet. Always so easy to redirect. Later that week, things got weird with Brandon. We were lying in bed when he asked if I wanted to go to his company picnic. Sure, I replied, scrolling through my phone. My coworkers are excited to finally meet you, he said, watching me closely. Kyle's girlfriend said she saw you at the mall last week, but you were with some guy. My stomach dropped. I played it off like it was my cousin visiting, but Brandon just nodded and rolled over. I could feel the temperature in the room drop 10 degrees. The next morning, I found my phone had moved from where I'd left it. The passcode screen showed failed attempts. Did you try to go through my phone? I confronted Brandon over breakfast. He looked at me steadily. Why would I need to look at your phone unless there's something to hide? I started a huge fight, stormed out, and spent 3 hours at the mall with Caleb. Perfect distraction technique. But I was running out of excuses to keep my two worlds separate. Caleb was getting pushy about seeing my place, and Brandon was asking more questions about my job search and my distant behavior. Something had to give. Friday was supposed to be perfect. Brandon texted that he'd be working late, inventory night at the warehouse. I immediately messaged Caleb that he could finally come see my place around 7 p.m. I spent the afternoon cleaning, buying candles and wine, making Brandon's apartment look like it could be mine. For a few hours, I could pretend this was actually my apartment. Right at 6:45, I was setting everything up, feeling pretty clever about how I'd managed it all. Then I heard Brandon's key in the lock. My heart stopped. He came in looking exhausted, dropping his lunch box on the counter. They finished inventory early, he explained, not noticing my panicked expression. Before I could process what to do, there was a knock at the door. Brandon looked confused. Are you expecting someone? I couldn't speak. My mouth went completely dry. Another knock, louder this time. Vicky, you going to get that? Brandon asked, heading toward the bedroom to change. My mind was spinning. I had seconds to decide what to do, tell Caleb to go away, pretend it was a delivery, but it was too late. Brandon, being the nice guy he is, opened the door himself. The look on Caleb's face when he saw Brandon standing there, I'll never forget it. Confusion, then shock, then this horrible realization. Who are you? He asked, his voice shaking. Brandon looked back at me, equally confused. I'm Brandon, Vicky's boyfriend. Who are you? And that's when everything exploded. Caleb pushed past Brandon into the apartment, looking around wildly. Boyfriend, we've been together for months. This is our relationship. I've been trying to see your place for weeks, and now I find out you're living with some other guy. Brandon's face went from confusion to this ice-cold anger I'd never seen before. What is he talking about, Vicky? I tried to play innocent, tried to make it seem like Caleb was just some crazy ex who couldn't let go. Brandon, this is nothing. He's just an ex who keeps harassing me. I told you about him, remember? Caleb looked like I'd slapped him. Ex, we were texting this morning. You told me you loved me last week. Brandon crossed his arms, staring at me. You told me you didn't have any exes in the picture, that your last relationship was over a year ago. She told me she lived alone, Caleb shouted. She's been inviting me over for weeks, but always canceling last minute. They both turned to me, waiting for an explanation. My mind was racing for a way out, but for once I had nothing. No excuse, no story, just the ugly truth hanging in the air between us. I can explain, I started, but even I didn't know what was going to come out of my mouth next. After the initial explosion, things got surgical. The two men compared notes like detectives, each revelation cutting deeper than the last. So every night you've been here with me, Brandon said, his voice flat. Every time you said you were job hunting or visiting your mom, you were with him. I felt tears coming, real ones this time, not the fake ones I usually use to get my way. I didn't mean for this to happen. I was going to tell you both, I just didn't know how. Caleb looked at Brandon, then back at me. How long have you been living here? 3 months, Brandon answered before I could. She moved in when she said her mom kicked her out. Caleb laughed, this horrible, hollow laugh. That's funny because she told me she got her own place 3 months ago, said her job gave her a promotion. What job? Brandon's voice was deadly quiet. She quit her job the week after she moved in here. I've been supporting her completely. The room felt like it was spinning, both of them staring at me, realizing every single thing I'd told them was a lie. Caleb shook his head and backed toward the door. You're unbelievable, he said. Actually unbelievable. Don't ever contact me again. And then he was gone, slamming the door so hard the pictures on the wall rattled. I turned to Brandon, ready to try to explain, to beg, to do whatever I needed to salvage this. But the look on his face stopped me cold. I'd never seen someone look so betrayed. Brandon, please, I whispered. I'm sorry, I'll explain everything. He just held up his hand. Don't. Then he walked into the bedroom and closed the door. I slept on the couch that night, or tried to. Brandon wouldn't talk to me, wouldn't even look at me. I kept knocking on the bedroom door, begging him to let me explain, but he just told me to leave him alone. The next morning, I woke up to Brandon standing over me, his phone in his hand, looking like he hadn't slept at all. Your boyfriend messaged me, he said, his voice flat. My stomach dropped. Brandon, he's not my, save it. He cut me off. Turns out he had a lot to say. Like how you told him you were working as a manager at that boutique store even though you quit months ago. Or how you've been taking money from him for rent on an apartment that doesn't exist. I couldn't deny it anymore. The evidence was right there. I made some mistakes, I admitted, trying to sound as sorry as possible. I was confused. I didn't know what I wanted. Brandon just laughed, not his usual warm laugh, but something cold and bitter. You knew exactly what you wanted. Free housing from me, money from him, the convenience of a stable boyfriend, and the excitement of whatever he was to you. Brandon, please, I pleaded. I messed up, but I really do care about you. Where am I supposed to go? I can't go back to my mom's. You know how bad it is there. For a second, I thought I saw a flicker of the old Brandon, the one who couldn't stand to see anyone suffering, who'd rescued me when I had nowhere to go. But then his expression hardened. That's not my problem anymore, Vicky. You made your choices. Now you get to live with them. He disappeared into the bedroom again. I heard drawers opening and closing. When he came back out, he was carrying a cardboard box. He started gathering my things from around the living room, my makeup from the bathroom counter, clothes I'd left on the floor, chargers and hair products. What are you doing? I asked, panic rising in my throat. What does it look like you're leaving? Today now. You can't be serious, I said, following him around as he tossed my belongings into the box. Brandon, it's Sunday. Where am I supposed to go? Please just give me a week to figure something out. He stopped, turned to look at me directly. You know what's funny? Your ex said almost exactly the same thing when I asked how long you've been seeing both of us. About a week after we started dating, that's what he said. So for our entire relationship, you've been lying to me. I made a mistake, I whispered. People make mistakes. This wasn't a mistake, Vicky. A mistake is forgetting to pay a bill or saying something thoughtless when you're angry. This was calculated. Every day, every lie, every time you went from his arms to mine, you chose that over and over again. I started to cry again, sinking down onto the couch. Please don't do this, please, I have nowhere to go. Brandon shoved the last of my things into the box and set it by the door. You have 1 hour to get whatever else is yours and get out. I'm changing the locks tomorrow. He pulled out his wallet, threw two $20 bills on the coffee table. That should cover a motel for tonight. After that, I don't care what you do. An hour later, I was standing on the sidewalk outside Brandon's apartment building, a cardboard box at my feet and a duffel bag over my shoulder, everything I owned in the world. The sky was getting dark, those heavy gray clouds that promise rain. Just perfect for my dramatic exit, right? I tried Megan, my old coworker from Trendy Treasures. We were never super close, but she was always nice to me. I called and miracle of miracles, she answered. I gave her the abbreviated version. Boyfriend kicked me out, nowhere to go, just for a few days until I figure things out. She hesitated, then said, I have a pull-out couch. It's not much, but you're welcome to crash for a night or two. One night turned into 5. Megan was nice enough not to ask too many questions, but I could tell she was waiting for me to either get a job or make other arrangements. By day 3, I was getting desperate. I'd applied to every retail store in the mall, but with my employment history, quitting without notice, and lack of references, no one was calling back. On day 6, Megan gently suggested it might be time for me to try a women's shelter. They have resources, she said. People who can help you get back on your feet, job placement, maybe housing assistance. The thought of a shelter made me feel physically ill. That wasn't supposed to be my life. That night, in a moment of weakness and after Megan went to bed, I texted Brandon. No accusations, no dramatics, just, I'm sorry for everything. I really messed up. I have nowhere to go. I watched the message status change from delivered to read almost immediately. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again, then nothing. No response. I tried Caleb next, swallowing what little pride I had left. I know you hate me right now, but I'm desperate. Can we talk? His response came quickly. You made your bed, now lie in it. Don't contact me again. The next morning, Megan sat me down at her tiny kitchen table. I hate to do this, Vicky, but my lease doesn't allow long-term guests. My landlord saw you coming and going and he's asking questions. You need to find somewhere else by tomorrow. I nodded, numb. I understand. Thanks for everything. That night, my last at Megan's, I made a list of all the mistakes I'd made. Starting with lying to Brandon from day one, continuing to see Caleb behind his back, taking money from both of them, quitting my job without having another lined up. But then, as I stared at the list, something strange happened. I started making excuses for each item. It wasn't really my fault I had to move in with Brandon. My mom's addiction had made our home toxic. It wasn't my fault I quit my job. My manager was impossible to work with. By the time I finished rationalizing, I'd convinced myself that I was as much a victim as anyone else in this story. Maybe more so. After all, Brandon and Caleb still had roofs over their heads. What did I have? The next day, I found myself back near Brandon's apartment building. I stood across the street, staring up at his window. The lights were on. He was home, probably playing his stupid computer game, eating takeout, completely fine without me, while I was literally homeless. A light rain started to fall. In movies, this would be the moment the guy looks out his window, sees the girl he loves standing in the rain, and runs down to sweep her into his arms. I took out my phone and called him. It rang 4 times, then went to voicemail. I hung up and called again, and again. On the 5th try, he answered. "What do you want, Vicky?" His voice was cold, distant. "I'm outside," I said, my voice breaking. "Please, Brandon, just talk to me. 5 minutes." There was a long pause. "No. I have nowhere to go," I was shouting now, not caring who heard. "It's raining. I'm standing here with everything I own getting ruined. After everything we had, you can't spare 5 minutes. We didn't have anything real," he said quietly. "It was all built on lies." "That's not true." I was sobbing now, that ugly, snotty crying that no one looks cute doing. "I loved you. I still love you." "No, Vicky, you loved what I could give you. There's a difference." He sighed. "Don't call me again." The line went dead. I stared at my phone in disbelief, then looked up at his window. The curtain twitched. He was watching me. I could feel it. Something snapped inside me. All the pain and fear and desperation crystallized into pure rage. I started screaming every obscenity I could think of, directing it all at his window. People walking by crossed to the other side of the street to avoid me. I didn't care. "You did this to me," I shrieked, my voice cracking. "You ruined my life." But even as the words left my mouth, I knew they weren't true. He hadn't done this to me. I had done it to myself. Every lie, every manipulation, every selfish choice had led me to this moment, standing in the rain, screaming at an apartment window like a lunatic. Eventually, I ran out of steam. My throat hurt. My eyes were swollen from crying. My clothes were soaked through. And Brandon's curtains remained closed. He wasn't coming down. He wasn't taking me back. It was really over. I picked up what remained of my soggy cardboard box and started walking. I had no destination in mind, just away from there. Away from the evidence of my failures. As I walked, I started working on my story. The version I would tell the next person who came along and offered to help me. The version where I was the victim of circumstance, of cruel men, of bad luck. The version where none of this was my fault. I needed a game plan. I was down to my last $60, the 20 Brandon had thrown at me plus what I had left from Caleb's last rent contribution. First, I found a cheap motel. $40 a night. One night was all I could afford, but it was better than nothing. The room smelled like cigarettes and the sheets felt damp, but at least I had walls and a roof. I counted up my remaining possessions. Everything I owned in the world was now either wet or wrinkled. I had some makeup, 3 outfits, my phone and charger, a half-empty bottle of perfume, and a few pieces of jewelry that Caleb had given me. None of them worth much. I sat on the bed and opened social media on my phone, scrolling through friends who might take me in. The problem was, most of my friends were actually just acquaintances, people I'd hung out with a few times at parties or bars. I'd never really invested in deep friendships, always too busy juggling my romantic relationships. There was Tasha from high school, but we hadn't spoken in years. Coworkers from my various jobs, but none I'd been particularly close to. I couldn't call my mom, she'd probably just ask me for money. That's when I realized how truly alone I was. For all my charm and social skills, I'd never bothered to build a support network that wasn't tied to what people could do for me. I woke up the next morning with my phone at 2% battery. I had exactly $20 left, enough for some food and maybe a bus ticket, but definitely not enough for another night at the motel. At the checkout counter, I turned on the charm with the middle-aged clerk. Is there any way I could stay just one more night? I'm waiting on a check and I'm in a really tough spot. He looked at me without sympathy. Checkout's at 11, no exceptions. I tried a different angle. What if I helped clean rooms or something? Just for one day, then I'll be out of your hair. We have cleaning staff. Checkouts at 11. At 10:55, I was back on the street with my bag and box, the latter now falling apart from the rain the night before. I transferred everything to my duffel and threw the box away. I wandered into a coffee shop, ordered the cheapest thing on the menu, a plain coffee for $2, and nursed it for as long as possible while charging my phone. When the barista started giving me pointed looks, I reluctantly packed up and moved on. The public library was my next stop. Free Wi-Fi, bathrooms, and no one could kick me out as long as I was quiet. I spent the afternoon applying for jobs online, every minimum wage position I could find. Fast food, retail, coffee shops, anything. With each application, I invented a more stable version of myself. Someone who didn't quit jobs impulsively, who didn't have gaps in employment, who was reliable and responsible. By closing time, I'd sent out 20 applications and had exactly $18 left. Enough for a fast food dinner and maybe breakfast the next day, but not shelter. As I sat on a bench eating my burger, I scrolled through Craigslist, looking for rooms for rent. Everything required first and last month's rent, security deposits, income verification, all things I couldn't provide. That's when I saw it, a post from someone named Jacob. Looking for roommate, $600 month, utilities included. No lease required, flexible on move-in costs for the right person. I messaged him immediately, concocting a story about a bad breakup, a temporary housing emergency, a good job waiting for me to start in 2 weeks. I sent my most flattering photo along with it. He responded within minutes, asking if I wanted to meet for coffee to discuss the room. I agreed, relief flooding through me. This could work. I just needed to be charming, sympathetic, not desperate. We agreed to meet at a diner near the bus station. I spent my last few dollars on a bus ticket and primped in the grimy bus station bathroom, doing what I could with my limited makeup supplies. Jacob turned out to be in his early 30s, with kind eyes and a nervous smile. He was lonely, I could tell immediately, the kind of guy who'd never had much luck with women. "So you said you're starting a new job soon?" he asked after we'd ordered coffee. I nodded, leaning forward slightly, making eye contact. "Office admin for a law firm. I start in 2 weeks, but my ex kicked me out and I have nowhere to go until my first paycheck." "That's rough," he said, genuine concern in his voice. "What happened with your ex, if you don't mind me asking?" I launched into my well-rehearsed story. How my boyfriend of 3 years had suddenly become controlling and jealous. How he'd thrown me out with no warning after an argument about nothing. How I'd been staying with friends but couldn't impose any longer. Jacob listened, his expression growing more sympathetic with each detail. By the time I'd finished, tears glistening in my eyes, he was sold. "You can take the room," he said. "Don't worry about the rent until you get your first paycheck. I know what it's like to go through hard times." Relief washed over me. I'd done it. I had a place to stay, time to figure out my next move, another man willing to support me through a temporary rough patch. As Jacob drove me to his apartment, I was already planning. I need to actually find a job this time, at least for a while. I'd need to be more careful, more strategic, not make the same mistakes I had with Brandon and Caleb. But deep down, I knew I hadn't really changed. I was already lying to Jacob, already seeing him as a resource rather than a person, already planning how to extend my stay if the fictional job didn't work out. 2 weeks later, I was comfortably settled in Jacob's spare room. No job had materialized, but I'd convinced him I needed just a little more time. He was kind, making excuses for me, even buying me groceries and toiletries when I mentioned I was running low on necessities. I'd started going through his mail when he was at work, checking his bank statements, getting a sense of his financial situation. He wasn't rich, but he was stable. He could support both of us if I played my cards right. The cycle was beginning again, but this time I told myself I'd be smarter, more careful. This time I wouldn't get caught. Some people never learn, I guess. I'm one of them. 3 months into living with Jacob, I had settled into a comfortable routine. My fictional job had fallen through after a company restructuring, but Jacob had been sympathetic. He even helped me apply for a customer service position at the cell phone store where his friend worked. I didn't actually want the job, but I went through the motions to keep up appearances. Jacob was different from Brandon and Caleb in many ways. He was quieter, more introverted, and painfully eager to please. He didn't ask too many questions when I said I needed to borrow money for various emergencies. He was also completely infatuated with me, which made everything easier. I'd been careful this time, learning from my previous mistakes. No overlapping boyfriends, no extravagant lies that could be easily disproven. Just enough dishonesty to maintain my lifestyle without setting off alarms. One evening, as Jacob and I were watching a movie on his couch, his phone buzzed with a notification. He glanced at it, then quickly turned it face down. "Everything okay?" I asked, feigning casual interest. He hesitated. "Just work stuff." I leaned over, resting my head on his shoulder. "You work too hard. You should tell your boss to leave you alone after hours." He smiled nervously. "It's not my boss." I sat up straighter. "Oh, who is it then?" "Just a friend," he said too quickly. My radar went up immediately. Jacob wasn't the type to have many friends, and he certainly wasn't the type to get secretive about them. I needed to know what was happening. "Jacob," I said, my voice soft but firm, "you can tell me." "Is it a girl?" He blushed furiously, confirming my suspicion. "It's nothing serious, just someone I met at the coffee shop. We've been talking a little." Panic flared in my chest. Another woman meant potential competition for Jacob's resources and attention. I couldn't afford that right now. "That's nice," I said, keeping my voice light while my mind raced. "What's her name?" "Alexis," he said, looking relieved that I wasn't upset. "She's a graphic designer. You should invite her over sometime," I suggested, already plotting. "I'd love to meet her." Over the next week, I casually gathered information about Alexis. Jacob was surprisingly forthcoming once he realized I wasn't jealous. They'd met 3 weeks ago, exchanged numbers, and had been texting regularly. He liked her but was nervous about asking her on a proper date. I needed to derail this relationship before it gained momentum. "Hey Jacob," I said one morning as he was getting ready for work. "I was thinking about your friend Alexis." "Yeah," he perked up, clearly happy I was showing interest in his life. "Why don't you invite her for dinner this weekend? I'll cook something nice and it might be less pressure than a one-on-one date." He looked surprised but pleased. "That's a great idea." "You'd really do that?" "Of course, what are friends for?" Jacob texted me later that day to say Alexis had agreed to come for dinner on Saturday. Perfect. I spent the next few days preparing. I cleaned the apartment thoroughly, planned an elaborate meal, and picked out my most flattering but modest outfit. I wanted to appear helpful and friendly, not like competition. When Saturday arrived, I was ready. Jacob was nervously straightening cushions when the doorbell rang. Alexis was annoyingly pretty, with short curly hair and bright, intelligent eyes. She brought wine and homemade cookies, which made me dislike her immediately. "It's so nice to meet you," she said, smiling warmly. "Jacob talks about you all the time." "All good things, I hope," I laughed, taking the wine. "Come in, dinner's almost ready." Throughout the meal, I played the perfect hostess. I asked Alexis questions about her work, laughed at her jokes, and made sure both her glass and Jacob stayed full. All the while, I was gathering ammunition. When Jacob excused himself to use the bathroom, I leaned in conspiratorially. "I'm so glad Jacob's finally meeting someone," I said in a low voice. "He's been through a rough time." Alexis looked concerned. "What do you mean?" "Oh," I feigned surprise. "I thought he would have told you about his ex and the restraining order situation." "Restraining order?" Her eyes widened. I nodded solemnly. "It was pretty bad. She was very unstable, accused him of all sorts of things. He's such a good guy, he didn't deserve any of it. That's why I've been staying here actually, as moral support." I could see the doubt creeping into her expression. "Perfect. He seems so gentle though," she said uncertainly. That's the thing about abusers, I whispered. They're often the ones you least expect. When Jacob returned, the atmosphere had shifted noticeably. Alexis was more reserved, checking her phone frequently. She left immediately after dessert, making an excuse about an early morning the next day. Jacob looked confused and disappointed. Did I do something wrong? I patted his arm sympathetically. I don't think so. Sometimes people just don't click. She never texted him again. Crisis averted. The next few weeks were peaceful. Jacob seemed to have accepted Alexis's ghosting and had retreated back into his usual routine. I continued my job search while actually spending my days browsing online shopping sites and watching reality TV. Then one evening, Jacob came home with an oddly determined expression. "Vicky, we need to talk," he said, sitting down across from me at the kitchen table. My stomach tightened. I knew that tone. It was the same one Brandon had used before everything fell apart. "What's up?" I asked casually, though my mind was already racing through possible escape routes. "I ran into Alexis today," he said, watching my face carefully. "She told me something interesting." I kept my expression neutral. "Oh, she said you told her I had an ex with a restraining order against me, that I was potentially abusive." I laughed, buying time. "What? That's ridiculous. Why would I say something like that?" "That's what I'd like to know," he said, his voice harder than I'd ever heard it. "Because I've never had a restraining order against me. I've never been accused of abuse." I switched tactics immediately. "Jacob, she obviously misunderstood me. I was talking about my ex, not yours. She must have gotten confused." He didn't look convinced. "She was very specific, Vicky." "Well, she's lying then," I said, allowing a note of hurt to enter my voice. "I can't believe you take her word over mine, after everything we've been through together." Jacob sighed, the anger seeming to deflate out of him. "You're right, I'm sorry, it just threw me off." I dodged a bullet, but I knew my position was becoming precarious. I needed a backup plan. The next day after Jacob left for work, I did a thorough search of his apartment. I found his financial documents, memorized his bank account numbers, and took photos of his credit cards. Just in case. I also started looking for new potential living situations. I browsed dating apps, keeping my profile hidden from Jacob's likely search radius. I chatted with a few promising candidates, but kept things vague about my current circumstances. One guy, Derek, seemed particularly interested. He owned his condo, had a stable job in it, and was clearly lonely. We exchanged messages for a few days before he suggested meeting in person. I agreed to coffee at a place downtown, far from Jacob's usual haunts. I told Jacob I had a job interview. Derek was tall with glasses and a nervous smile. "Perfect. It's nice to finally meet you," he said as we sat down with our drinks. "Your photos don't do you justice." I blushed on cue. "You're sweet. Thank you for suggesting this place, it's lovely." Our conversation flowed easily. I told him my carefully crafted story about recently moving to the city for a fresh start after a bad relationship. I mentioned being temporarily staying with a cousin until I found my own place. "Housing market is brutal right now," he sympathized. "My place is too big for just me, honestly. I bought it thinking I'd be married with kids by now." I widened my eyes. "That's so refreshing to hear. Most guys I meet are terrified of commitment." By the end of our coffee date, Derek had suggested a second meeting. I'd laid the groundwork perfectly, hinting at my housing struggles without directly asking for help. Men like Derek love to play the hero. Over the next 2 weeks, I juggled my time between Jacob's apartment and secret dates with Derek. It was tricky, but I'd gotten better at maintaining my lies since the Brandon and Caleb disaster. Meanwhile, Jacob was growing increasingly suspicious. He'd check in randomly during the day, asking where I was and what I was doing. He'd scroll through my phone when he thought I wasn't looking. The Alexis incident had planted a seed of doubt that was slowly growing. I needed to accelerate my timeline with Derek. On our fourth date, over dinner at an expensive restaurant he insisted on paying for, I let myself tear up slightly when he asked about my living situation. "It's getting complicated," I admitted, voice vulnerable. "My cousin's boyfriend moved in unexpectedly and the apartment is tiny. I feel like I'm intruding." Derek reached across the table to take my hand. "That sounds really stressful." I nodded, wiping away a fake tear. I'm looking for my own place, but everything requires first and last month's rent plus security deposit. I just started my new job, so I don't have that kind of cash saved up yet. What if, he said slowly, clearly considering his words carefully, you stayed with me for a little while, just until you save up enough for your own place? I made a show of reluctance. Oh, Derek, I couldn't impose like that. It's not an imposition. Like I said, my place is too big for just me anyway. And it would give us a chance to get to know each other better. I squeezed his hand gratefully. Are you sure it would just be temporary? Absolutely, he smiled. When would you want to move in? This weekend? I suggested, thinking of Jacob's growing suspicions. If that's not too soon. Derek agreed enthusiastically, and just like that, I had my exit strategy. The next day, I waited until Jacob left for work, then began packing my things. I didn't have much, just clothes and personal items, making it easy to fit everything into my duffel bag. I took one of Jacob's credit cards as insurance, tucking it into a hidden pocket in my wallet. I was almost finished when the apartment door opened unexpectedly. Jacob stood there staring at my packed bag with a mixture of confusion and hurt. What's going on? He asked. Why aren't you at your interview? I scrambled for an explanation. I was just organizing my things. The interview got rescheduled. He stepped forward, picking up a folded shirt from my bag. You're packing, Vicky. Where are you going? Nowhere, I insisted. I'm just cleaning up. Jacob pulled out his phone, tapping the screen a few times before turning it to face me. It showed a dating app profile, my photos, my descriptions. A friend of mine saw this, he said quietly. He recognized you from the dinner party we had last month. My mind raced. I'd been careful to use photos Jacob hadn't seen to set my search radius away from his likely locations. But I hadn't accounted for his wider social circle. It's not what it looks like, I started, but even I could hear how hollow the words sounded. Stop lying, Jacob said, his voice tight with anger. Just stop, all you've done since moving in is lie. That's not fair, I protested, shifting to offense. I've been nothing but grateful for your help. Grateful? He laughed bitterly. Is that why you told Alexis I was abusive? Why you're on dating apps behind my back? Why my credit card bill shows charges I never made? I felt the situation slipping from my control. Jacob, please, I can explain everything. I'm sure you can, he said, moving to block the doorway. You're very good at explanations, but I checked your references for that job you claimed to have lined up when you moved in. They'd never heard of you. My mouth went dry. You checked up on me. After the Alexis thing, yes, and guess what I found? Nothing matches, not your previous address, not your employment history, not even your full name. I hadn't expected this level of investigation. Jacob had seemed so trusting, so easily manipulated. Who are you really? He asked, his voice sad now rather than angry. Is anything you told me true? For a moment, I considered telling him everything. About Brandon and Caleb, about my mother, about my lifetime of deceptions. But what would be the point? He'd already decided who I was. You wouldn't understand, I said finally. Try me, I shook my head. I need to go. To your next victim, he asked pointedly. The word stung more than I expected. It's not like that. Then what is it like, Vicky, or whatever your name is? I shouldered my bag, avoiding his eyes. I have somewhere to be. I want my credit card back, he said firmly. I feigned innocence. What card? The one you took from my wallet last week. I've already reported it stolen, so it won't work anyway. Reluctantly, I reached into my pocket and handed over the card. My insurance policy gone. Is there anything else you took that isn't yours? He asked. No. He stepped aside, allowing me to pass through the doorway. Don't come back, Vicky, and don't contact me again. I walked out without looking back, trying to maintain what dignity I had left. Another bridge burned, another fresh start needed. I texted Derek immediately. Can I come over now? The situation with my cousin got worse. His reply came quickly. Of course, I'll send you my address. As I waited for the bus to Derek's neighborhood, I mentally rehearsed my story. How my cousin's boyfriend had made inappropriate advances. How I'd had to leave suddenly for my own safety. How grateful I was to have met someone as kind and understanding as Derek. The trick, I'd learned, was to mix just enough truth with the lies to make them believable. And to move on before anyone could dig too deeply. Some people might call me a con artist or a manipulator. But from my perspective, I was just doing what I needed to survive. If men like Jacob and Derek and Brandon wanted to rescue a damsel in distress, who was I to deny them that savior complex? The bus pulled up to my stop, and I stepped off, ready to begin again. New place, new story, same old Vicky. Derek's condo was everything I had hoped for. Spacious, modern, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. When he opened the door and saw me standing there with my duffel bag, red-eyed and shaken, his protective instincts kicked in immediately. "Are you okay? What happened?" he asked, ushering me inside. I let my lower lip tremble. My cousin's boyfriend came home drunk and started making comments about my body. When I told him to stop, he got aggressive. I had to get out of there. Derek's face darkened with anger. "That's horrible." "Did he hurt you?" "No," I sniffled. "But I was scared. I'm sorry to show up like this, but I didn't know where else to go." "You did the right thing," he assured me, taking my bag. "Let me show you to the guest room." The guest room was bigger than Jacob's entire bedroom, with its own ensuite bathroom and a view of the park. I set my things down, noting the high-quality sheets and the expensive-looking decor. Derek clearly had money, more than Brandon or Jacob had. "Make yourself at home," he said from the doorway. "Stay as long as you need to." I gave him a grateful smile. "Thank you, I promise it won't be for long." "No rush," he insisted. "I'm just glad you're safe." That first evening, Derek ordered takeout and we ate on his balcony, watching the sunset. He asked no invasive questions, just let me talk about innocuous topics like movies and books. I deliberately steered clear of personal history. Knowing the fewer details I provided, the fewer lies I'd have to remember later. When I yawned pointedly, he immediately took the hint. "You must be exhausted. Get some rest and we'll figure everything out tomorrow." I slept better that night than I had in months, nestled in expensive sheets in a room that smelled like lavender and cedar. No worries about Brandon discovering my lies, no Jacob watching me suspiciously. Just peace and the prospect of a fresh start. The next morning, I woke to the smell of coffee and bacon. Derek had prepared breakfast, setting the table with actual cloth napkins and fresh flowers. "I wasn't sure what you liked," he said apologetically, "so I made a bit of everything." I surveyed the spread, toast, eggs, bacon, fruit, and smiled warmly. "This is incredible. You didn't have to go to all this trouble." "It's no trouble," he insisted, pulling out my chair. "I never really have a reason to cook for anyone. It's nice to have company." Over breakfast, Derek explained his work schedule. He worked from home 3 days a week and went into the office the other two. His job in IT security paid well but demanded long hours sometimes. "Make yourself comfortable while I'm working," he said. "Mi casa y su casa." I spent that first week settling in, learning Derek's routines, and figuring out what role would best secure my position. Derek wasn't like Brandon, who needed a domestic girlfriend, or Jacob, who wanted emotional validation. Derek, I discovered, craved intellectual companionship. He lit up when we discussed books or politics, seeming genuinely interested in my opinions. So I became the intellectual equal he longed for. I read the books on his shelves, watched documentaries instead of reality TV, and engaged him in thoughtful conversations. It was more work than my previous roles, but also more stimulating. By the second week, I had established a comfortable routine. I would make coffee when Derek started work, bring him lunch at his desk, and have dinner waiting when he finished for the day. I kept the apartment tidy but not too perfectly, suggesting a comfortable lived-in feel rather than maid service. "You know you don't have to take care of me like this," Derek commented one evening as I served a pasta dish I'd spent hours perfecting. "I want to," I assured him. "It's the least I can do for your hospitality." He looked at me thoughtfully. "Have you had any luck with apartment hunting?" My heart skipped a beat. Was he already trying to get rid of me? "Few leads," I lied smoothly. "But everything in a decent neighborhood is so expensive. I'm saving up though." Derek nodded. "No rush." "I like having you here." Crisis averted, but I made a mental note to be more proactive about securing my position. The next day, I left a romance novel conspicuously on the coffee table, dog-eared to a particularly steamy scene. When Derek came home, I made sure he caught me reading it, blushing when our eyes met. That night, our goodnight hug lingered a bit longer than usual. Progress. A month into my stay with Derek, I felt confident enough to suggest taking our relationship to the next level. I cooked his favorite meal, wore a new dress I'd bought with the emergency cash I kept hidden in my duffel bag, and opened a bottle of wine. "What's the occasion?" he asked, looking pleased but confused. I smiled shyly. "Just wanted to thank you properly for everything you've done for me." After dinner, as we sat on the couch with our wine, I leaned in and kissed him. He responded eagerly, and soon we were tangled together, hands exploring, breath quickening. "Are you sure?" he whispered, pulling back to look at me. I nodded, feigning vulnerability. "I've never felt this safe with anyone before." The next morning, I woke up in Derek's bed instead of the guest room. He was watching me, a soft smile on his face. "No regrets?" he asked. "None," I assured him, snuggling closer. Life with Derek was easier than I'd expected. He was generous with his money, insisted I use his credit card for necessities, and never questioned my past too deeply. When I told him I'd finally found a job at a boutique downtown, he seemed genuinely happy for me, never once asking to see my paycheck or questioning why I still wasn't looking for my own place. The boutique job was real, surprisingly. I'd applied on a whim, thinking it would provide good cover for my extended stay with Derek, and actually got hired. The pay was minimal, but it gave me spending money and a reason to be out of the apartment for a few hours each day. 3 months into our relationship, Derek suggested I officially move in with him. "It seems silly to keep calling you my guest when we both know you're more than that," he said, playing with my hair as we lay in bed. "Just let go of this idea that you need to find your own place. Stay here with me." I pretended to consider it carefully. "Are you sure? It's a big step." "I'm sure," he said firmly. "In fact, I got you something." He reached into his nightstand and pulled out a small velvet box. My breath caught. This was moving faster than I'd anticipated. He opened the box to reveal a key. "It's official now, your name's even on the buzzer downstairs." Relief mixed with slight disappointment washed over me. "Derek, this is so thoughtful, thank you." As I took the key, I realized how comfortable my life had become. Derek was easy to please, financially stable, and seemed genuinely enamored with me. Perhaps this could be a long-term situation rather than just another stepping stone. The thought both comforted and unsettled me. I'd never stayed with anyone long enough to build a real life together. What would that even look like? A week later, I discovered I'd left my phone at home while at work. When I returned to the condo, Derek was sitting at the kitchen table, my phone in front of him, his expression unreadable. "You got a text," he said flatly. "From someone named Brandon." My blood ran cold. I'd blocked Brandon months ago. How was this possible? "Brandon," I repeated, trying to sound confused. "He says, and I quote, 'Jacob told me what you did to him. You need professional help, Vicky. Stop using people.'" Derek looked up at me, his eyes hard. "Who's Jacob? And what did you do to him?" My mind raced. "Brandon's my ex. He's been harassing me for months. Jacob is his friend who he tried to set me up with after we broke up. I went on one date with him and turned him down. They've been bitter ever since." The lie sounded hollow even to my ears. Derek pushed my phone toward me. "Unlock it." "What? No, that's private." "If you have nothing to hide, then what's the problem?" I felt the situation spiraling out of control. "The problem is trust, Derek." "You're going through my phone behind my back?" I wasn't going through it. It kept buzzing with messages, and when I saw the preview, I got concerned. I snatched my phone from the table, quickly checking what else might have come through. 3 messages from Brandon and 2 from an unknown number that was probably Jacob. "This is exactly why I left my last relationship," I said, injecting righteous indignation into my voice. He was controlling and paranoid, always checking up on me. Derek's expression softened slightly. "I'm not trying to control you, Vicky, but something doesn't add up here." "What doesn't add up?" "That my ex is a jerk who can't move on. That he's trying to sabotage my happiness now that I've found someone better." "No," Derek said quietly. "What doesn't add up is that I did some research on you. Or tried to. There's virtually no online presence for a Victoria Ramirez of your age in this city. No social media older than 6 months. No employment history I could find. I felt as if the floor was tilting beneath me. You investigated me? After that message came through, yes, wouldn't you be curious? I needed to regain control of the narrative fast. I had to delete my old accounts because of Brandon's harassment. I changed my number, my email, everything. I was trying to start fresh. Derek sighed. I want to believe you, but can you see how this looks from my perspective? You show up out of nowhere with a sob story about needing a place to stay temporarily, and 3 months later, I'm getting cryptic warnings from people claiming to know you. I let tears fill my eyes. So you think I'm lying, that I'm some kind of con artist or something? I didn't say that, Derek backpedaled, discomfort clear on his face. I just want to understand what's going on. What's going on is that my abusive ex is trying to ruin my life again, I said, voice breaking. And instead of supporting me, you're taking his side. I'm not taking anyone's side, Derek insisted. I just want the truth. I stood up abruptly. The truth is that I thought you were different, that I could trust you, but clearly I was wrong. I stormed into the guest room where I still kept most of my things and began throwing clothes into my duffel bag. Derek followed, looking alarmed. Vicky, stop. You don't have to leave. Let's just talk about this. There's nothing to talk about, I snapped. You've made it clear you don't trust me. That's not fair, you're overreacting. I laughed bitterly. Am I? You went behind my back to investigate me. What part of that should I not be upset about? Derek ran a hand through his hair, clearly frustrated. Look, I'm sorry for looking at your phone and for Googling you, but you have to admit getting a message like that would make anyone curious. I paused my packing, sensing an opportunity. So you admit you were wrong to doubt me. He hesitated just a fraction too long. I admit I should have talked to you first instead of snooping, but I still have questions. What questions? I challenged. Ask me anything. Who is Jacob really, and why would he contact Brandon about you? I took a deep breath, deciding to gamble on a partial truth. Jacob was someone I stayed with briefly after leaving Brandon, just a roommate situation. It didn't work out because he wanted more than friendship and I wasn't interested. I guess he and Brandon connected somehow and now they're bonding over their mutual dislike of me. Derek considered this. And that's it, there's nothing else I should know. That's it, I said firmly. Now it's your turn to decide. Do you trust me or not? He looked torn, clearly wanting to believe me but still harboring doubts. I want to trust you, I really do. I softened my approach, stepping closer to him. Then do, trust is a choice, Derek, choose me. He pulled me into an embrace, and I felt his resistance melting away. I choose you, he whispered into my hair, crisis averted for now. But as I unpacked my hastily gathered belongings, I knew my position had grown precarious. Brandon and Jacob were actively trying to warn people about me. How long before they found a way to reach Derek that I couldn't intercept? I needed a new plan, a new city perhaps. Starting over was becoming tediously familiar, but it was better than facing the consequences of my actions. That night, as Derek slept beside me, I scrolled through job listings in other cities. Maybe it was time for Vicky Ramirez to disappear and someone new to take her place. The texts from Brandon and Jacob continued sporadically over the next few weeks. Each time, I deleted them before Derek could see, but the damage was done. He never fully regained his trust in me, asking subtle questions about my past, watching my reactions carefully. I felt like I was walking on eggshells in what had once been a comfortable arrangement. I knew I needed to make a decision. Stay and try to salvage things with Derek or move on to someone new. The logical choice was to stay. Derek was financially stable, the living situation was comfortable, and starting over again would be exhausting. But the texts were a constant reminder that my past was catching up to me. One evening, as Derek and I were having dinner, his phone rang. He glanced at it, then excused himself to take the call in his office. I thought nothing of it until I noticed he'd been gone for nearly 30 minutes. When he returned, his face was carefully neutral. Work stuff, he explained, not meeting my eyes. I knew instantly he was lying. Derek was many things, but a good liar wasn't one of them. Something had happened, someone had contacted him. I could feel the walls closing in. That night I waited until Derek was asleep before carefully extracting myself from his arms. I crept to his office and found his phone charging on the desk. I knew his passcode, had watched him enter it countless times while pretending not to look. The call had come from an unknown number. I checked his recent text messages next. Nothing suspicious. Finally, I checked his email. There it was, an email from Brandon with a simple subject line. About Vicky. I opened it with shaking hands. Derek, you don't know me, but I'm reaching out because I'm concerned. Vicky Ramirez isn't who she claims to be. She has a pattern of moving in with men, living off them, and then disappearing when things get complicated. She did this to me, then to a guy named Jacob, and now apparently to you. I'm attaching screenshots of conversations between Jacob and me, as well as photos that prove she was living with both of us under false pretenses. I don't expect you to believe a stranger, but please be careful. She's manipulative and will make you feel crazy for questioning her. If you're already having doubts, there's probably a good reason. The email had several attachments: photos of me with Brandon, me in Jacob's apartment, screenshots of text conversations where they compared notes about my lies. It was all there, irrefutable evidence of exactly who I was. Derek had seen it all. And he'd said nothing. I deleted the email, though I knew it was pointless. Brandon would have kept receipts, could send it again. The damage was done. I returned to bed, mind racing. Derek knew everything now, or at least enough to piece together the truth. He was probably just biding his time, figuring out how to confront me, or perhaps waiting to see what lie I'd tell next. I couldn't stay. By morning, I had decided to leave before Derek could throw me out. I would take what I could carry and disappear. Start fresh somewhere Brandon and Jacob couldn't find me. The next day, I called in sick to work and began my preparations. I went through the apartment while Derek was at the office, gathering small valuable items that wouldn't immediately be missed. A silver letter opener, cufflinks from a drawer Derek never opened, a few 20s from the emergency cash he kept in the kitchen. Nothing too obvious, but enough to give me a small financial cushion. I researched bus routes to nearby cities, checking schedules and fares. I considered which persona to adopt next, what story would be most effective in securing another living situation quickly. As I was packing a few essential items into my duffel bag, my phone buzzed with a text from Derek. Coming home early. Need to talk. My heart raced. This was it. He was going to confront me, maybe even call the police if he discovered the missing items. I needed to leave immediately. I grabbed my bag, did a final sweep of the room for anything essential, and headed for the door. Just as I reached for the handle, it opened from the other side. Derek stood there, looking surprised to see me poised for departure, bag in hand. Going somewhere? He asked, his voice carefully controlled. I fumbled for an explanation. I was just heading out to pick up some medicine. I haven't been feeling well. With all your belongings? He nodded at my overstuffed duffel. I swallowed hard. These are just dirty clothes for the laundromat. Vicky, he said quietly, I think it's time we had an honest conversation. He moved past me into the apartment, setting his work bag down and taking a seat on the couch. He gestured for me to join him. Reluctantly, I did, still clutching my duffel bag like a shield. I got an interesting email yesterday, he began. There it was. No point in denying it now. From Brandon, I said flatly. Derek looked surprised that I knew. Yes, he had quite a story to tell about you. About how you moved from him to Jacob to me, creating different personas, different lies. I waited, saying nothing. Any defense I offered would just be another lie at this point. The thing is, Derek continued, I already knew something wasn't right. The way you showed up so suddenly, your vague explanations about your past, how perfectly you seemed to become exactly what I wanted, it was too good to be true. I just didn't want to admit it to myself. So what now? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. That depends, he said. Are you finally ready to tell me the truth? The real truth, not another carefully crafted story. I considered my options. I could spin another tale, something that acknowledged parts of what Brandon had revealed while painting myself as the victim. I could deny everything, claim Brandon was obsessed and creating elaborate fictions. Or I could, for once, be honest. What would be the point? I asked instead. You've already decided who I am, Derek sighed. That's just it, Vicky. I don't know who you are. I don't think you do either. His words hit me with unexpected force. In all my calculations, all my manipulations, I'd never stopped to consider who I actually was beneath the personas I created. My mom's an addict, I said suddenly, surprising myself. Has been since I was a kid. I learned early that the only way to survive was to become whatever people wanted me to be, to find people who could take care of me because she couldn't. Derek remained silent, listening. Brandon was the first guy who let me move in. I had nowhere else to go. But I was also seeing another guy, Caleb, taking money from both of them. When they found out about each other, Brandon kicked me out. That part's true. I took a deep breath, finding it strangely liberating to finally speak the unvarnished truth. I stayed with a former coworker for a while, then met Jacob. Same story, different guy. When that fell apart, I found you. It's what I do. It's all I know how to do. And now you are leaving, Derek observed, nodding at my bag, without even saying goodbye. You saw the email. You know who I am now. It was only a matter of time before you threw me out too. Derek leaned back, considering me with an expression I couldn't quite read. You know what's interesting about Brandon's email? He warned me you'd make me feel crazy for questioning you, that you'd have an explanation for everything. But he never said you were dangerous or that you'd stolen from him, just that you were manipulative and dishonest. I shifted uncomfortably, unsure where he was going with this. I think you're so used to running that you don't know how to stay, he continued. Even when someone might be willing to accept you, flaws and all. I laughed bitterly. Accept me now that you know I've been lying to you from day one? I'm not saying it's not a problem, Derek clarified. The lying, the manipulation, it has to stop. But I'm also not naive enough to think people are just one thing, all good or all bad. What are you saying? I'm saying you have a choice. You can leave right now, find someone new to become whatever they need, and continue this cycle. Or you can stay, get professional help for whatever trauma led you here, and see if there's something real between us beneath all the pretense. I stared at him, genuinely shocked. You'd let me stay after everything? With conditions, he said firmly. Complete honesty from now on, therapy non-negotiable, and you contribute financially to our household with a legitimate job. Why would you even consider this? I asked, bewildered. Any sane person would change the locks and never look back. Derek was quiet for a moment. Because beneath all the lies, I've seen glimpses of someone worth knowing. Someone in pain who never learned healthy ways to connect with people. And because everyone deserves a chance to become better than their worst mistakes. His words struck a chord somewhere deep inside me, a place I'd kept carefully walled off. The possibility that I could be more than this endless cycle of deception and flight was both terrifying and oddly compelling. I don't know if I can change, I admitted. This is all I've ever been. That's not true, Derek said gently. It's just all you've ever allowed yourself to be. I looked down at my duffel bag filled with hastily packed belongings and small stolen treasures. The weight of it suddenly seemed immense. Not just physically but emotionally, a burden I'd been carrying from place to place, relationship to relationship. What if I try and fail? I whispered. What if this is just who I am? Then at least you'll know you tried, Derek said. And that's worth something. I sat there, perched on the edge of his couch, poised between staying and fleeing. The familiar urge to run was powerful, a well-worn path my mind automatically followed at the first sign of discovery. But there was something else too, a tiny, fragile spark of curiosity about what it might be like to stop running, to face myself honestly. I need to think, I said finally. Derek nodded. Take all the time you need, but leave your bag here as a gesture of good faith. I hesitated, then slowly set the duffel on the floor. I'll be back in a few hours. I hope so, he said simply. I walked the city streets for hours, lost in thought. Every instinct honed over years of survival screamed at me to disappear, to find a new city, a new mark, a new identity. It would be easier, more comfortable, familiar territory. But Derek's words kept coming back to me. Was he right? Had I been so focused on becoming what others wanted that I'd never discovered who I actually was? Could I be more than this endless cycle of manipulation and escape? As night fell, I found myself back at Derek's building. Our building, as I'd come to think of it. I stood outside, looking up at the windows, remembering standing outside Brandon's apartment in the rain, screaming accusations, blaming him for my choices. I could leave, take a bus to another city, find another Jacob, another Derek, start the cycle again, or I could stay. Face the mess I'd made. See if there was anything salvageable in the wreckage of my lies. I took out my phone and for the first time in years did something completely honest. I typed out a message to Brandon. You were right about me. I'm sorry for how I treated you. I'm getting help. Then I deleted the draft without sending it. Some bridges were too thoroughly burned to rebuild. But the acknowledgement, even if just to myself, felt important. Next, I composed a message to Derek. Coming up now, no more running. I pressed send before I could change my mind. When Derek opened the door, I stepped inside without my duffel bag. I'd left it at a donation center on my way back, along with the small items I'd taken. It wasn't much of a gesture, but it was a start. I want to try, I said simply. I don't know how to be honest, how to be real, but I want to learn. Derek nodded, relief visible on his face. That's all anyone can ask. That night, as we lay in bed, I told him my real name, my real history, all the ugly truths I'd spent years obscuring with carefully crafted fictions. It was terrifying and exhausting and strangely freeing. The next day, Derek helped me find a therapist. The day after that, I confessed to my boss at the boutique that I'd lied on my application about my employment history. Surprisingly, she didn't fire me, just put me on probation with a warning. Small steps, each one slightly less painful than the last. Like to say everything changed overnight, that I became a paragon of honesty and self-awareness. But the truth, as I was slowly learning to embrace it, was messier than that. I slipped sometimes, falling back into old patterns of manipulation when I felt threatened or insecure. The difference was I began to catch myself doing it. And sometimes when I couldn't, Derek would gently point it out. 3 months into my new attempt at genuine living, I received a text from a number I didn't recognize. Jacob told me you're still with Derek. Hope you're not pulling the same old tricks. Some people never change. My finger hovered over the delete button, my first instinct to hide any evidence to protect my new fragile existence. Instead, I showed it to Derek. Brandon, he asked. I nodded. What should I do? What do you want to do? I considered the question carefully. Part of me wants to ignore it. Another part wants to defend myself, tell him he doesn't know me anymore. But I think what I really want is to acknowledge that he has every right to be angry, and then let it go. Derek smiled, a genuine expression of pride that made something warm unfurl in my chest. Then do that. I typed a simple response. I understand why you feel that way. I'm sorry for what I did. I'm trying to be better now. I hit send, then blocked the number. Not to hide anything this time, but to close that chapter and focus on the one I was trying to write now. The path ahead was uncertain. I had years of patterns to unlearn, defense mechanisms to dismantle, and genuine connections to build. There were no guarantees that I would succeed, or that Derek would stay if I faltered too many times. But for the first time since I could remember, I wasn't looking for the next escape route, the next person to become for, the next lie to tell. I was simply trying to discover who I might be if I stopped running, stopped hiding, stopped manipulating. Some people never learn. I'd told myself that night in the rain outside Brandon's apartment. Maybe I was one of those people. Or maybe, just maybe, I was finally ready to learn the most important lesson of all, how to be myself, flawed and real and honest. Only time would tell.